Ladies and gentlemen, of course, a new patch has arrived to Wuthering Waves, version 2.2. And with that update, of course, we're going to have a bit of a readjustment of the tier list to, of course, account for our newest 5-star Resonator, Cantarella, and some other updates that might have come with their release. I just wanted to go ahead, go through the changelog, go through some of the tier list updates, maybe take a look at their Cantarella page, and let you all know what some of the big findings are. So with that, let's go ahead and get right on into it, starting off with the changelog. All right, this time around, the tier list changelog won't be as long as the previous ones. 3 reasons. First, the new characters we got this 2.2 update didn't change too much in the meta. So Cantarella didn't particularly change too much, and so didn't Arrow Rover. You can view that as you will. So little changes were justified in relation to them. Second, when it comes to TOA, we didn't have many of the points we made discussed by the community, so we judged major changes unnecessary. That kind of just meant that the changes that they made to the TOA in the 2.1 update to account for, different rankings, stuff moving up or down, it wasn't too much of a bit of controversy. There's no real need to go ahead and break them down any further. I think they were sort of universally accepted everywhere. And so maybe Whimpering Waste is going to be the main topic of discussion over here, and that's what it looks like it is. Third, Whimpering Waste had overinflated HP pools, which Kuro changed this patch to make things easier. This made testing for the current meta difficult, as we wanted to push out a changelog on 2.2's release in time for Cantarella and Arrow Rover. Unfortunately, we haven't had enough time to try out Arrow Rover either, but we have almost everything ready. Expect them to be added in a day or two. So we're probably going to need a second video following up on this because, of course, right, Whimpering Waste was adjusted the day of the 2.2 patch, and so Prydwen's going to need some time, right, to go ahead, do a little bit of calculations, and, move forward from there. So we're probably going to have a follow-up video after this one, breaking down what some of those changes. Be on the lookout for a second video. With that out of the way, let's get into the changelog for TOA. As a reminder, Whimpering Waste will be updated in a few days and should receive more changes than what we have for TOA here. Kind of what I just said. More changes are warranted for Weewa. We're just going to test anything yet. Yeah, kind of just saying the same thing twice, but I guess they just want to have the glue. They just want to have the backing for why the changelog is a little bit short. So let's get on into the new character, Cantarella. Cantarella added as a tier 1. Cantarella is a good unit that can fulfill many roles, such as dealing damage, healing, and buffing, very similar to units like Brant in that sense, and similar in strength and weaknesses to Yinlin, which is why we're placing her in tier 1. She has a solid position in the meta, but runs into issues in regards to resonance energy, and her lack of definitive top team meta where she's the best option. The only unit able to make full use of Cantarella's skill and Havoc Damage Amplify outro skill is Dan Jin, and while she can act as a main DPS, this actually makes the team pretty viable, it's hard to justify playing Dan Jin this way instead of a buffer for units like Havoc Rover, or even Camellia if you don't have Sanhua available. I would sort of put Havoc Rover a little bit into the more viable category, because they're kind of the only other Havoc DPS that can actually damage with resonance skills. We all know that Cantarella's amplification is 20% to Havoc and then 25% to resonance skills. And Camellia, let's be honest here, deals literally no resonance skill damage. And so she's kind of off the table for buffing. Havoc Rover is the only other Havoc character that kind of, you could consider Tao Chi, but not really. Havoc Rover is kind of the only other DPS-oriented character that can do that. And so I'm surprised that she's not in, or he, she, whatever gender your Rover is not sort of listed in here. A little bit interesting. This means in top skill damage teams, she's outdone by units like Jeja, and in top Havoc teams, she's outdone by units like Sanhua, who coincidentally, both of those characters they just mentioned that outperform her, they're in tier 0. This makes it difficult to justify her rating any higher than tier 1, which I think is fair at this point in the game. Cantarella has no real best in slot partners, other than her being very, very good for Jinsei, which I'm surprised she isn't really listed in here for, because she has way more coordinated attacks than Jeja if you're going through some of her more complex rotations, and that can lead to her having a very, very big uptime on Jinsei's full Forte circuit charge that I feel like characters like Jeja might not actually be able to get. With that being said, Cantarella can hope for a future Havoc skill DPS stronger than Dan Jin, who will allow her to reveal her full potential. But until that happens, it's unlikely she goes up the tier list as things stand. I've always been of the boat that Cantarella is more of a rerun-oriented character, somebody that gains a lot of value once you're able to pull her with another member of the roster. It was the same exact thing with Jeja, where on Jeja's release, she wasn't really that good because she only supported Jinsei and was kind of just a really not that solid, like, you know, very low tier option for pretty much every other unit in the game. But with Carlotta's release, suddenly Jeja now supports two very, very high tier characters in Carlotta and Jinxie. And so that's why Jeja got bumped up. We can expect a similar thing to happen for Cantarella, because she buffs Jinxie in a very strong way. Encore. Encore has had the expert tag added, +1, so she goes up a ranking. Encore is a character that requires a lot of testing from us because she's one of the game's most underused DPS units. Just part of being a standard. So there's not so much to go off of. We fortunately have come up with some optimizations for her that allow you to squeeze much more damage out of her when executing proper animation cancels during her ultimate window, similarly to Jian. The two always end up being comparable somehow. I'm gonna be real here. I still think Jian does more damage in every single way, but maybe I still need to be proven wrong on that. All in all, this warrants the addition of the expert +1 tag, just like Jian, thanks to the extra damage you can squeeze out of her. New rotations will be up on the website with calculations very shortly, hopefully in time for our Weewat tier list update. Maybe they're using her there. Yanwu has just had the shield tag added. I thought that they already added this. I'm kind of surprised that this is news. Rover Havoc has had the heal tag added as well, and that pertains to Havoc Rover's S3. Wait, Havoc Rover heals? Hold up one second. Oh my god. Wait, they do. Wait, they do heal. Holy shit. I guess it's the fact that it's a self-heal. I feel like most people didn't realize this at all. So, yeah, I guess Havoc Rover can, in fact, use Rejuvenating Glow if you want to. I feel like I read this sequence note, and I was just like, yeah, this is some absolute doo-doo water. I think I read this and I was just like, okay, don't get hit forehead. Yeah, I don't think that's wrong. But those are going to be the main updates in here, some new discoveries on our end. But I do think it's a very, very fair breakdown of everything that they're doing in regards to the new units. Unfortunately, it looks like Arrow Rover isn't actually on the tier list yet. Maybe they need to do like some more testing. I don't think that I saw where they're being placed. And so maybe they're waiting a little bit longer to make some adjustments for that, because of course, Arrow Rover is a brand new character. Maybe they just want to grind the weapon from the main story quest to see how she does. So that's going to be the list. Now let's move on forward into the actual tier list and the changes. Absolutely nothing is changing in tier 0. All the same characters that we've been seeing for a while now are going to stay up here. We got the Jinxie, Carlotta, the Jinxie, Carlotta, Phoebe, the Sanhua Jeja, the Shorekeeper, Verena. Makes a ton of sense to me. Tier 0.5 has had absolutely no updates as well with Camellia, Havoc Rover. I still don't think Havoc Rover... and Zhang Liao, along with Mortifi in tier 0.5 because they support Jian and Phoebe. And now we're going to get into tier 1, which is kind of like where the big updates have been made. Encore getting that expert tag, so she goes up to tier 0.5. Same exact situation with Jian. And then we also got the whole sub DPS category, which is, I mean, this is a little bit wild once we think about it, right? Basically, every single limited sub DPS, aside from Jeja, is like in tier 1. And not like tier 0.5. And I think that this, when you like factor in how reliant a lot of these characters are on having like a best in slot partner due to how specific their buffs can be. Like we've got Fusion Resonance skill, we got Havoc Resonance skill, we got Fusion Liberation, Havoc basic attack, and then Electro Liberation. The damage bonuses can be very, very, very specific overall. I would say that there's probably some movement that we should do in some of these categories. We could consider, you know, maybe bringing Rosia and Brant up at this moment in time. I do think that Yinlin sort of belongs down here due to how complicated she can be to play relative to like her actual rewards. And Cantarella, I do think easily belongs in tier 1, simply due to the fact that, again, she does not have her best in slot partner ready to go. And then the buffing that she does ends up being like a little bit sussy in most situations, other than using her with Jinxie. But, you know, Jeja sort of already takes care of that category. Moving down even more, it looks like nothing else has really changed. We got Baizha in tier 1.5. She's usable. And then we got the Danjin, the Spectral Rover, and the Yang Yang. Yang Yang and Danjin with the expert tag can move up to tier 1 and kind of like they could make this 7 if you're playing them well. Next up, we got the niche characters. And yeah, these are kind of like, if you look at any gameplay video, you look at any streamer, you look at any CC, you look at any B-roll on YouTube when it comes to Wuwa, nobody's using these fucking units. Pretty much nobody is using these units unless they have literally no other option in their gameplay. You just see over here the Chisha. Yeah, she has solo capabilities, but nobody's really using her as a main DPS. Calcharo's too damn hard to play for 99% of the population. Alto is just like a mistake in terms of his design because he literally cannot do AoE damage. Ling Yang is just Ling Yang. And then Jianjin is too slow. Lumi is chilling down here. Maybe she could move up a little bit. Tao Chi, I feel like, should still move up because of how well she works with Carlotta. And then we got Yohu, who's just bad. Just really bad. And then Yanwu down over here. So that's going to be all the main changes. Unfortunately, like Prydwen said, Weewa is going through some more testing with all the updates that they made for 2.2. So we're going to see a follow-up on this one later. Overall, I gotta say that, yes, this is a really, really small update. Not a lot has occurred, not a lot of movement at all. What I'm surprised by is the fact that Arrow Rover hasn't been added to the tier list, and so that might be something that we have to see in the next update, because Arrow Rover is kind of like a blend of, like, they are a support because they heal. Most people will be using them on the Rejuvenating Glow set, but they primarily only support one team in the present with Gian. We're gonna do some testing on that once we do have Arrow Rover ready to go, but you do have to progress through and complete the entire main story to reach Arrow Rover's full potential, because that's where their sword is. And their sword is like basically a part of their kit. So we'll get into that once it's over there, but that's going to be the list of updates for now. And so what I wanted to do was just get into, well, what their Cantarella section is looking like, things like their rotations, things like those strengths, and see, you know, how I generally feel about the character compared to Prydwen. So let's just read a bit of a review. Strong on and off-field presence with big on-field hits and background coordinated attacks. Works in many teams by amplifying both skill and havoc. Sort of true. Extra healing and slows down enemies. True. Has lots of valuable weapon choices. Very, very, very true. She has a lot of usable options. But the cons, and I do think there are a fair number of cons with the unit. Huge ER requirements depending on your build. An energy regen main stat echo may be required, causing significant decrease in her damage. By extension, all teammates will require more energy regen than usual as well. No perfect meta-relevant team at the time of a release when she's a clear best-in-slot choice for some unit that doesn't exist yet. I do think that her ER requirements, a lot of people have been saying she needs more than 130. She needs like 140, 150. I've been able to get some pretty just fine rotations off with her on 130. If you just look at my guide, that is the unit that I'm using. She's at 130 ER and she has her liberation. She has pretty much everything ready to go in every single rotation. And what I end up doing is casting like 2 resonance skills across her rotation, the baseline ones that generate trance. And then I end up doing 3 full Phantom Sting attack chains and then casting a resonance skill at the end of it. It is like slightly longer than maybe like the fastest one ever, but yeah, I've been having decent luck with her at 130. So maybe that's just something that needs a little bit more testing to optimize some of her rotations to work at lower ER. Her only way to stand out from other coordinated attacking hybrids is by offering extra healing, which may not be necessary for a lot of players. And she could be distracting to play. That could be a pro as well. Come on. Okay. Prydwen got jokes. Yeah, she's got some crazy jiggle physics and, of course, crazy assets. So I agree generally with these pros and cons. The only one that I'm a little bit iffy about is this whole huge ER requirement one, because, I mean, I'm going to be real here. I don't feel like I've experienced exactly what they're talking about over here. Now, let's get into the gameplay and the teams, maybe a little bit about those rotations, and then maybe that's why we'll find out a bit more about why they're feeling this way when it comes to her ER requirements. So we got a standard rotation over here. Generate 5 points of trance up front, enter Mirage, use Forte enhanced skills at 3 points, and then just use the rest of her basic attacks afterwards. So, I see what the issue is over here. I do see what the issue is, ladies and gentlemen. So, it looks like they're only doing one set of the Phantom Sting attack chain, when Cantarella has genuinely 5 stacks of trance maximum. This means that she's actually able to get off a couple more of these Phantom Sting attacks after casting Perception Drain. And when Perception Drain applies, you know, the Hazy Dream debuff and basically sees them, it kind of sets you up to do the next 2. What I typically end up doing is I do a skill before her rotation. It's a very short 6-second cooldown. You intro skill onto her, basic P3, and then you skill again, and you'll be at 4 points of trance. Then you just use your heavy attack, you use the skill again, use 3 Phantom Stings to end up at 1 trance, and then use her liberation after the Perception Drain over here. Then you just simply cast 3 more Phantom Sting attacks and then echo an outro skill. That's kind of like what I do to manage her rotations at lower ER. You can kind of see you're not doing a lot of attacks, and so I'm personally not surprised that there isn't a lot of ER going back into her. That's why people are recommending you go 140 to 150, because we're kind of just not making use of the rest of her Forte bar when we're doing a rotation that's this short. But this is clearly, right, going to be a lot faster of a rotation comparatively than maybe some of the other stuff in her kit. And so maybe that's why they're recommending this one, because it is the fastest. But I do think that you can pump out some extra damage while you're on her and manage more of her ER requirements by extending it a bit. And she attacks with these Phantom Sting attacks really fast anyways, so I don't find it to be much of an issue. Now we got the synergies. Okay, Camellia Havoc Rover, Dan Jin, Carlotta, Jinxie, Verena, and Shorekeeper. I'm gonna be real here. I think they should just take Camellia off. I do believe Cantarella's literally just worse than Dan Jin in this sort of setup. She's just worse than Dan Jin and then worse than Sanhua in this setup. I wouldn't even put her on here because I do feel like it's a bait, knowing that you have 4-star options, which when those 4-star options are at S6, right? Like, let's just look at a Dan Jin at S6 over here. I mean, you kind of got 20% attack as well on top of her outro buff. And of course, right, Sanhua is going to have 20% attack as well. And that just kind of makes it a lot better than the buffs that Cantarella would provide anyways. Because, let's be real here, 25% resonant skill amp literally does nothing for Camellia. She does no resident skill damage. But when it comes to the rest of this roster, they're actually making more use of her outro skill. And I think that this is a little bit, I would just take Camellia off if I'm being honest. It is like a bit of a bait. It's just objectively worse than the other options that we're going to have available for the unit. So that's just kind of like what we're looking at over here. So that's that. I gotta say that for this list of updates, I think that it might have been worth delaying this whole update if we were gonna have, like, I guess this much segmented info, but maybe they just wanted to drop something on release day and then put in all the stuff with Arrow Rover once they were, you know, kind of like fully established with the patch. They did more testing and things like that. They even have like the disclaimers for it, especially when it comes to Weewa. But I do think it's a bit of a miss not to have a mention of Arrow Rover at all because, you know, it is the third form of Rover that we're getting for free and they do come with their own weapon. So yeah, so they, oh, okay, no, they do have a disclaimer for it. They are being added in a day or two. So I guess we'll just be making, again, a follow-up video on this whole situation for when Arrow Rover and the Whimpering Waste update is good to go. I gotta say, I agree with everything so far, but still do think that tier 1 units, some of these should start getting moved up a bit because I'm personally of the belief that Brant is a lot stronger than what's maybe being indicated over here, even if he's on like the standard 5-star weapon, because you can just run like Molten Rift and then still end up doing some decent stuff with him. But yeah, that'll be that. So let me know what you all think. Peace.